This is Laura Cross of Rebel Seed Studio from Military Dispatch. You're listening to Battlefield Fallujah, the true story of one of the deadliest battles of the Iraq War. This audio documentary series is based on the book Operation Phantom Fury, The Assault and Capture of Fallujah, Iraq, by U.S. Marine Corps veteran Colonel Dick Camp, and features interviews provided by the U.S. Department of Defense and the Marine Corps History Division. Be aware, this series contains explicit language, includes graphic accounts of war violence, and depicts the deaths of Marines and soldiers. For episode transcripts and supplemental material, or to download the free companion Battle Rattle kit, visit the podcast website at militarydispatch.com. Battlefield Fallujah, Episode 6, Into the City, Regimental Combat Team 7, November 7th, 8th, and 9th, 2004. Supporting RCT-1 was Regimental Combat Team 7, known as RCT-7, comprising 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, 2nd Battalion, 2nd Infantry, and additional Iraqi security forces. RCT-7's mission was to destroy enemy in-zone and seize RCT-7 objectives in order to protect the flank of the division's main effort. Lieutenant Colonel Nicholas Vukovic, RCT-7's operations officer.
The primary objective we had was division objective number 2, which was the Mayor's Complex. The Mayor's Complex was indicated as a priority objective due to a couple of reasons. The first one, it was believed to be a command and control node for the Mujahideen in Fallujah. Number 2, it was key terrain to seize in order to stand up the follow-on or interim government. RCT objective 1 was the Hydra Mahmadiyya Mosque. Again, based on intelligence, very active command and control node for the Mujahideen in Fallujah.
The division wanted Objective 2, the Mayor's Complex, taken early in the operation because it was also going to be used to stand up the follow-on or interim government. RCT-7 organized 3 forays to get a closer look at the terrain it had to transit and to evaluate the enemy. Lieutenant Colonel Vukovic.
At the squad level and below, there was an organization, there was some very well-disciplined fires, also disciplined to the extent they held the ground, and some of the fires were accurate. They were using some very effective infiltration means, moving in very small groups up to 4, maybe 6, gathering in large groups for a short period of time, then moving on foot. Very savvy to the sound of ISR, very savvy to the sound of the AC-130 aircraft approaching overhead. They possess skills in small unit movement and also small unit fence and fire movement in some cases. They definitely received training and had been training, no doubt in my mind.
The regiment also inserted the specially trained teams from 2nd Force Reconnaissance Company. Captain Jason Schaubel, one of its platoon commanders, said, "We did 2 separate dismounted night missions looking for trafficable routes for both 1-8 and 1-3. The first mission was successful. However, on the second mission, approximately 300 meters from the city, Team 2 did get compromised and had to pull back to call in artillery and air support. The team was able to extract without casualties after watching an AH-1 Cobra attack helicopter put a Hellfire missile into the insurgents' position. Team 1 was inserted into the northwest edge of the city. Staff Sergeant Mark Dietrich, 2nd Force Recon, Team Leader, Team 1.
My team was 500 yards from the main city of Fallujah. We built up our sniper hide. That morning we started observing people up in the buildings. Right off the bat, took some shots with the Sasser. I was carrying the Sasser, the 50 cal sniper rifle, because they were 700 yards away inside brick buildings, so I was punching holes in the building to try to deter them or hopefully get them.
The information the teams collected was incorporated into the regimental intelligence plan and used to determine the best routes to reach the breach points. Lieutenant Chris Boggiano's 2nd Platoon BRT, consisting of 20 men and 4 Humvees, was tasked to set up 2-2 Infantry's assembly area. At first light, the platoon was authorized to move. Staff Sergeant Jimmy Amiette noted, "We had to drive the Humvees up a steep slope. We're looking straight at the sky, and all of a sudden we crested the top, and there was the city. The minute we pulled up, we started receiving small arms fire. Then we started raining down thunder on them, using mortars and artillery. Lieutenant Colonel Peter Newell, commander U.S. Army 2nd Battalion, 2nd Infantry Regiment, moved 2 tanks forward to a location where they could fire into the city. First Lieutenant Christopher Connor, commanding officer, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines.
That night, as the attack kicked off, sitting on the edge, and you could see everything that was going on. You could see the air doing their part, the artillery doing their part, and the Marines were really, really pumped up. They were ready to get into the action, ready to go.
The breach. On D-1, Task Force HVT, composed of Marines from 2nd Force Reconnaissance Company, was assigned to precede the breach. Major David Morris, 2nd Force Recon, Air Officer and Forward Air Controller.
Our objective in there was to conduct sniper operations, reconnaissance and surveillance, and shape the battlefield. Essentially, Colonel Tucker wanted us to bloody the nose of the Mooj and let them know that we were going to take care of business.
3 reconnaissance teams and a SEAL sniper team conducted a nighttime infiltration to within a few hundred meters of the city and set up hidden shooting positions known as sniper hides. They immediately spotted small clusters of enemy. Major Morris.
We saw 4 to 5 Mooj that were outside the building and kept going in and out, and it was an educated guess that there were probably several more in the building. Well, to take those out with the snipers would be very, very difficult because we may get 1 or 2 before the rest of them move. So that was our initial request for CAS. It took nearly an hour to get an approval on that thing, and we're just lucky that the Mooj did stay at that same building. So we prosecuted this target, the train station. We put a GBU-12 on it. We destroyed the entire building. All the Mooj were eliminated that were outside the building, and then whatever Mooj were inside. Also, we received friendly fire. It was pretty dedicated fire. It was 25 millimeter. It was heavy caliber, and it was very, very accurate. It was actually coming into our position. It was accurate enough that it was coming in, and ricochets were coming in within a few feet of our personnel, and it was several hundred rounds. So we finally had to fire a Red Star cluster to get them to stop, because they were not only firing on the headquarters element, they were firing on all the teams as well. We don't know whether or not they saw us as enemy, or whether or not it was just several hundred stray rounds that went a little bit too far, and they didn't realize they were shooting out of their area.
The teams took out 4 or 5 priority targets that RCT-7 wanted eliminated before crossing the line of departure. Major Morris.
We started prosecuting a lot of CAS targets. We ended up getting to take out 4 of the 6 priority targets that RCT-7 wanted taken out before they went across the LOD. Not necessarily by us, but they needed taken out either by tanks or by someone. We did several arty missions, several sniper shots. We dropped anything from GBU-12, the laser-guided bomb, to doing strafing runs with 20 millimeter and 25 millimeter from Harriers and from FA-18 Hornets. That's more of an intimidation factor because we had several Mooj that were coming up with AK-47s attempting to move towards our positions. They didn't know specifically where we were, but after we ran a couple strafing runs on them, they didn't have any desire to come up towards our positions. So it's a very good intimidation tool to keep them back because they see that aircraft coming down straight at them and then hundreds of bullets flying at them.
The teams used laser-guided bombs and cannon fire from aircraft to attack insurgent personnel and positions, in addition to taking out individual enemy with well-aimed sniper shots. Staff Sergeant Dietrich's team focused on the railroad tracks.
My team was tasked with the northeast side of Fallujah, the railroad track, to see if anything was mined, trafficability, route, pictures of the railroad tracks, slopes, angles, degrees, so they know whether they need engineer equipment to get over those railroad tracks.
The reconnaissance teams marked the routes for 1-8 and then pulled back to link up with it. 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. Lieutenant Colonel Gareth Brandel assigned battalion objectives, the Al Hydra Mosque, the Cultural Center, and the Mayor's Complex, because they were significant ideological targets that the enemy wanted to hold. Brandel's plan called for Bravo Company and Charlie Company to pass through 2 breaches in the railroad to seize a foothold in the city. Alpha Company was to remain in the attack position. At 1900, Weapons Company, 2 infantry platoons, and a platoon of tanks moved forward to covered positions. 2 tank-escorted amphibious assault vehicles towing trailers containing line charges rolled up behind them. The first trailer was positioned, and the firing sequence initiated. Major Mark Wynn, Battalion Executive Officer.
It didn't detonate. I think the initiating device was cut. One of the Marines, I think it was Lance Corporal Fowler, had to go out and manually prime the MICLIC. So he was like the forward Marine in front of everybody while his firing's going off, out there manually priming the MICLIC to blow.
This time it worked. The 2nd AAV moved into the cleared lane and repeated the process. Charlie Company passed through the breach on foot. First Lieutenant Christopher Connor, Charlie Company Executive Officer.
We got the platoons online. The way Charlie Company would be attacking would be 2nd Platoon was the westmost platoon to include Ethan pushing south. Beside it was 3rd Platoon. And behind 3rd Platoon, protecting the flank of the company, was 1st Platoon. Murphy, of course, enlisted in the Marine Corps a long time ago, and he showed his face there that night. We had 2 D9s, heavy equipment bulldozers, that would block roads for us, and they were the ones who actually pushed all the earth to make that breach. Well, the very first one that went through the breach got stuck in mud in a swamp. So automatically, boom, there's one stuck. So now we only had another one to work with. And the purpose of these D9s was to secure our flanks. So they were going to push up earthen barriers for us to protect our flanks running from east to west. Well, just as the 2nd D9 pulled in and started doing some work, it got stuck in the mud too. So now we had a D9 that was stuck and immobile, and we couldn't leave it, of course, so automatically we had to leave one squad from 1st Platoon, who's protecting our flanks behind, and guard that D9, the equipment and the personnel running it.
Captain Theodore Bethea, Commander, Charlie Company.
The breach consisted of Task Force HVT initially being in position to get a reconnaissance of where the breach should occur. Once they determined the lane that would be suitable for moving our forces through the area, they ported that in, and then engineers prepped line charges to go ahead and conduct the breach. Basically what happened was the tanks moved forward with the AAVs towing line charges on trailers. The tanks move up, one AAV moved up, deployed its line charge detonated, then after that the AAV and that trailer pulled off to the side, the tanks moved forward and the 2nd AAV moved up and then deployed its line charge. Once both line charges were detonated, the engineers went through and marked with chem lights the entranceway to the breach, the path through the breach, and then the exit points from the breach. And that initiated my company on the Braxton Complex, which is located directly east of the major traffic circle. And the engineers did an outstanding job opening the gates of Fallujah for us.
The company dismounted from the AAVs and advanced toward their objective, the Braxton Complex, a series of run-down apartment buildings. Captain Bethea.
We moved through at night, dismounted under direct and indirect fires. We moved across the major road behind the tanks, and once we moved out in front of the tanks, I immediately displaced them forward to be forward of our position. The objective we secured was the Braxton Complex, a known enemy strong point, and half of it was rubble, which made movement extremely difficult.
Sergeant Benjamin Eggersdorfer, Charlie Company, 3rd Platoon, Squad Leader.
When we first hit the city, it was a lot of confusion. The breach was a little further away than we had planned. With the tanks going off, there was a lot of confusion at first.
Some of the confusion was caused by the fact that the houses they planned on using had been destroyed. First Lieutenant Connor.
We went through the breach, got to the places where we thought we were going to kind of go firm at until we readjusted, but only to find out that the buildings that we had been planning on, kind of going firm in, had already been destroyed. So a little bit of confusion there. Buildings were smashed. It was a pretty chaotic scene in that people were tripping, falling. It was dark, of course.
Sergeant Eggersdorfer.
Once we moved into our houses, gained a foothold in the city, that's when things started kicking off. The first night, we managed to move maybe 3-4 houses southward. It was very slow moving, the dark, climbing over walls, going through houses.
Eggersdorfer's squad found that almost every house they searched had some sort of cache, weapons, ammunition, or explosives.
We pushed forward all through the day. Pretty much every house we went through, we found some sort of cache. Our attached engineers blew it as we went. Every house, almost, they were setting charges in, blowing caches.
As they advanced, they were hit with machine gun, RPG, and sniper fire. 2 Marines were wounded, one seriously enough to require immediate evacuation.
When we started moving out down south further to the next mosque, we took fire. Marine in one of the other squads was injured. Evac'd him. Is Lance Corporal McWilliams. He has got a ricochet in the foot from a bullet. So we moved him back, and my squad and the rest of Lance Corporal Ward's squad, we were kind of pinned down in place as we were moving forward. Pinned down for approximately 2 to 3 hours. After that, we ended up pulling back, and there were multiple snipers up there.
Despite the resistance, Captain Bethea pushed 2 platoons forward to expand the foothold.
Upon seizing a foothold at the Braxton complex, we immediately came under machine gun fire, RPG fire, as well as sniper fire from the immediate areas. I pushed my 2nd platoon forward, as well as my 3rd platoons forward, in order to expand the foothold. Once I knew that the foothold was expanded, we then called forth and had the Iraqi forces come through the breach and then join our company. Once the Iraqis had joined our company, our force reconnaissance elements had joined our company, we were going into the attack and pressing the attack with a force of 303 Marines and sailors. For the penetration in zone, I directed the company to fight in an L-shaped formation with 2 platoons abreast and 1 platoon being behind the platoon on my eastern flank to create an L, and this formation maximized firepower to the front as well as denied the enemy to my flank, which is the asymmetric tactic in fighting a superior conventional force. The initial resistance to the front was heavy, and then he in turn attempted to roll my flank, and that's when my 1st platoon was prepared to repel that assault.
His attached tank platoon led, using their 120mm gun to take out enemy snipers.
Moving into the city was once again leading with fires. The most important fire support asset we had during the city fighting was the tanks. The tanks could locate the snipers in strong points and destroy them with main gun. Additionally, as the enemy came towards our zone, we were able to employ the AC-130 that had extreme precision fires on enemy troops out in the open. And finally, the enemy that were attempting to hit our flank were destroyed by our 1st platoon. Fires we faced was grenades, rocket-propelled grenades, machine gun fire, and sniper fire. One of our D9s got stuck in the breach, so I had an immediate security concern on that. Additionally, we had to conduct link-up with the Iraqis, which we'd never worked with before. However, we had a good rapport with the handlers, and the handlers were constant professionals. The handlers are all from prior military backgrounds, primarily in Special Forces, former U.S. Rangers and Navy SEALs.
Bethea's men continued the attack, with Force Recon Marines protecting his eastern flank.
We pressed the attack throughout the early morning hours, and then we consolidated again right before our final phase line before we deployed to attack to seize the mosque. By this point, the sun is starting to come up. It's becoming light outside. I had to ensure that my 3rd platoon got up online with my 2nd platoon because they were heavily engaged in clearing pockets of enemy resistance in the mountain environment. Additionally, we had another D9 tractor that got stuck, and so my 1st platoon was providing security on that. I knew before I could press the attack on the mosque, I had to get the security requirements of the D9s to the Iraqis that were in our rear, and so I coordinated to have an Iraqi unit provide security on the D9 with one of my 1st squads. While that was going on, I was able to push my 3rd platoon to get up online with my 2nd platoon. Once we started doing that and coordinating that, our force reconnaissance elements began taking casualties due to the intense rocket and sniper fire that they were taking in order to protect my eastern flank. Conducted CASEVAC to take care of those casualties as quickly as I could. By this time, it was about 07 in the morning. Continued taking very heavy sniper fire, RPG fire, and machine gun fire from our eastern flank, and the Force Recon Marines were fighting it off with absolute professionalism.
As the company advanced, an insurgent fired several shots at them from an alley. First Lieutenant Connor.
We maneuvered around this individual. We started maneuvering down another alleyway. There were a couple of insurgents at the end of this alleyway. As the Marines started going down, this is where we took our first casualties. The insurgent rolled a hand grenade down the road, ended up exploding and fragged one of our Marines, and he went down. Marines being Marines, going to get their wounded. They ran up to grab him and pull him out of the kill zone, and the insurgent, who they did not have eyes on yet, threw another hand grenade, fragged those Marines. Initially, the Marines thought that they were trapped in an IED alley because they didn't see an insurgent anywhere. They thought that somebody was watching them and doing it remote detonated. They didn't realize it was grenades. All of a sudden, we had 2 squads pinned down because every time they were trying to go down the road, they were getting hit. A couple other Marines got fragged just a little bit but kept on going, but there were 3 down hard at that point. That's when the machine gun team for that squad pulled out its thermal optics, started looking around. They saw the guy hiding behind the building, opened up on him, and he's history now. But, unfortunately, he had buddies who were crawling all around the street. We had Basher on station, which is the C-130 gunship. We had him in direct support of us. Since we were the main effort at the time, we had the air support. My FAC and I got on the radio, had Basher roll around, He was spotting individuals. Since the enemy was so close to us at that point, Basher was having a hard time discerning, who's friendly and who's not. I gave pause reps to my FAC. I told him exactly where our guys were at. Basher was like, okay, I think I got him then. We told Basher to go ahead and prosecute. He ended up toppling the building with these guys in it. Basher estimated about 31 guys right there. So that was a good surface that we hit hard, and now it became a gap for us.
Shortly before dawn, Charlie Company hunkered down for a breather. The company's embedded journalist, Luis Cinco, took several photographs. The next day, his image of Lance Corporal James Blake Miller resting on a curb, smoking a cigarette, hit the front page of more than 150 papers. The iconic image and the young warrior in the photo became known as the Marlboro Marine. First Lieutenant Christopher Connor.
Lance Corporal Miller, he is with 1st Platoon, Charlie Company 1-8. He's platoon radio man, so he carries the radio for the platoon commander, goes everywhere where the platoon commander goes. So you can imagine the kid's probably pretty much exhausted because platoon commanders have to be everywhere on the battlefield. After the initial breakthrough, when we go through the breach, we encountered some pretty hard fighting all the way up until that morning. That morning, I guess, was the time when the platoon could finally, take a second to sit down, relax. And in that moment of time, when Lance Corporal Miller sat down, popped a cigarette in his mouth, I think there were still rounds whizzing by to take a drag off the cigarette. Embedded reporter who was with us ended up taking a picture of Lance Corporal Miller. Somehow, some way, the very next day, Luis, who took the picture, was able to get that picture back to the LA Times, who he works for. That next morning, I believe it was November 10th back in the States, Marine Corps birthday, that picture showed up on just about every front page in the free world of Lance Corporal Miller smoking a cigarette after an exhausting day and night of fighting. Rumor has it that this picture is as big as the Iwo Jima flag raising right now. Lance Corporal Miller, great Marine, couldn't have happened to a better guy. Right now he's thinking, what is everybody making a fuss about? Because, it was just a picture. I was just doing my job, doing my part, just like any of us were that day.
Charlie Company was positioned less than 500 meters from the battalion's main objective, the Al Hydra Mosque. Captain Michael Stroud, Bravo Company's forward air controller, was on a roof.
At that point, I had no visibility on calling training targets. Basher, an AC-130, was on station. We had reports of where some of this rocket fire, mortar fire was coming from. I had Basher go take a look at it, and he found a group of 10 to 15 individuals, which was well beyond our front lines. He PID'd them and cleared them hot, engaged those individuals. While he was doing that, 3rd Platoon took some fire. I got Basher back, had him search the area for where that fire was coming from. Running to the south, he found 4 individuals. One had broken off, and he engaged the 3 under my control. I never worked the C-130 before, and I found out that actually it's a pretty awesome weapon.
After running the 2 targets, Stroud moved south with Bravo Company to phase line Cathy in support of an attack on the Al Hydra Mosque. As daylight broke on the morning of November 9th, Force Recon prepared to move to support the attack on the mosque. Major Morris.
As we got ready to move, they fired a smoke mission. Basically, it was a screening mission with Artie. That mission came in right on top of us. Basically, the canisters landed all over the place. They actually caught, I think it was one of Bravo. It was one of the other Marines, not from Charlie Company, but it basically caught his blouse on fire and they had to pull it off of him. So it was a little bit short. But we moved from there. It provided a great screen for us.
Lieutenant Colonel Brandel launched the attack on the mosque with 2 companies. Bravo Company was to provide support by fire from the Iraqi Cultural Center across the street from the Al Hydra Mosque, while Charlie Company seized the area surrounding the structure. An attached Iraqi unit called the Emergency Response Unit, or ERU, billed as the National SWAT Team, trained by former SEALs and other special ops forces, was tasked to enter and search the building. The Al Hydra Mosque was a known insurgent command and control center and a weapons storage location. It was also considered to be a key piece of terrain. Charlie Company Commander Captain Bethay.
The mosque was a battalion objective. It was actually Regimental Combat Team objective number 1. And the reason it was is during the April offensive, it was a key focal point for the insurgents. And immediately behind the mosque was a former Ba'ath Party headquarters building, which was obviously key as well to the resistance in Fallujah.
First Lieutenant Christopher Connor.
The minuet is very dominant in the terrain of Fallujah. I climbed all the way up to the top of the minuet and looked out. You can see the entire city of Fallujah from that minuet. You can see where the Marine forces actually staged forces at before the attack. So if they had eyes, if they had people up there, they definitely knew we were coming that day.
If the enemy staged or attacked from a culturally sensitive location, such as a mosque, the structure would lose its protected status. RCT-7 Intel Officer Major Lawrence Hussey.
The mosque minarets, we could see fire coming from them. You could see it from the ground. You could see it from the UAVs. The enemy made an assessment on us based on what we had done before, where in their mind they thought that we would not engage the mosque because we held it in enough regard that we didn't want to do that. They underestimated the fact that if they're going to use that and they're going to attack from that and they're going to fight from that, then it becomes a military objective. It's no longer a protected structure.
Major Andrew Hesterman, RCT-7's air officer, was concerned about how the media would report hits on mosques, but was confident that the precision strikes, which focused on the minarets, caused minimal damage.
The thoughts that went through my head as I look back and realize that we've knocked over 8 minarets, and thinking what Al Jazeera or one of those places is doing it. I mean, I can see it now, that emasculation of the Islamic people or something to that effect, but knowing that we did the right thing because we were very surgical about it. I'm still impressed with the aircrew's capability of putting the bombs right where we needed them, and it was the direct threat. I really think that the insurgents believed that they could use the mosques because we weren't going to shoot them, and for the most part we didn't shoot the mosques. We shot them out of the minarets.
Charlie Company cautiously advanced through a built-up area to a location close to the mosque. Captain Bethea directed his 3rd Platoon, the Fist, and Team 1 2nd Force Reconnaissance Company to cover the eastern flank.
This team for the attack on the Hydra Mosque consisted of Bravo Company providing support by fire on the western side of Route Ethan. What we did as the Marines is we pushed forward and gained a last covered and concealed position right across the street from the mosque. I had my 3rd Platoon as well as the Force Recon cover my eastern flank, and they were inflicting heavy enemy losses as well as taking some casualties during this mission.
First Lieutenant Christopher Connor.
We called for some fires, called for some air. The intent here, though, was not to call for fire or air on that mosque because it was a pretty important piece of terrain, and at the same time, of course, reduce collateral damage. We didn't want to destroy something like that, which would, in the long run, be very detrimental to the Iraqi government and the city of Fallujah. We made very sure that we weren't processing our fires near the mosque.
Force Recon Team 1 took up a position in a 4-story building to provide overwatch. That is where they got into a sustained firefight for the entire day, taking heavy fire from all directions. Major Morris.
We moved into a building and set up, and little did we know, we moved into a hornet's nest. It was an area that basically was in a gap between where 1-8 was going to go and where 1-3 was going to go, and that scene was teeming with enemy. It was amazing. We got in there and we were taking fire from 360 degrees. I'd never experienced anything like that in my life. We were taking dedicated machine gun fire, dedicated sniper fire, heavy caliber fire. It was just absolutely amazing. We were firing back with everything that we had. We didn't carry 240 Golf. We were firing back with sniper rifles. We were firing back with our M4s. We were firing back with SALs. We were firing back with our M203s. We had good eyes on specific targets. We fired a laser mat into a building. The problem was that at that time, in the fog of war, the companies had started moving up, and Bravo had started moving up. Actually, I think it was Alpha that had moved up, and the problem was that we didn't know where everybody was. So we couldn't call in CAS because we get on the top of the building and I look over 100 meters to our east, there's a squad of Marines sitting on the top of the building. I look up 150 meters to my northwest and there's another squad of Marines. And we're like, we have no idea. We know they're 1-8s, but we don't know whose they are. There's just a lot of confusion. I look up a couple hundred meters to the north, and there's another group of Marines on a building. And I'm like, there's no way that we can call in CAS right now, because everybody's danger close. It was one of those things we made a conscious decision. We could not do CAS at that time, because we were afraid we had fragged friendlies, and we could not do ARTI. So essentially, we were left to our own volition, what we had in our hands, to prosecute these targets all around us.
The insurgents were shooting small arms and RPGs from fortified positions, and the team was returning fire when Petty Officer Nate Bernash, the team corpsman, was shot. Staff Sergeant Dietrich.
Started taking enemy fire from multiple directions. My corpsman, he was standing by the wall. Rounds were impacting above us, but one of them ricocheted down and hit him in the back and knocked him down. And me and Staff Sergeant Sneed, we pulled him into a safe area. Took his gear off. He had an entry wound in, I believe it was the upper right shoulder. We went ahead and put a Atcherman chest seal for a sucking chest wound on his wound. There was no exit wound. Got him on a litter, got a Casevac to us. We took him downstairs, loaded him on the Casevac.
Bravo Company was also shooting it out with the insurgents. Captain Stroud.
The whole company was on top of the two buildings and started opening up. The sound was deafening, ricocheting off those buildings, off the walls, machine guns, everybody packed together. It was loud.
A truck pulled up behind his rooftop position. At the same time, he spotted an insurgent in a doorway.
There was actually a truck that pulled up behind us, like an SUV. So one guy in a doorway. I started firing that way. Everyone else was engaging that area. There was at least one dead body in front of the truck. So we put a 203 into the truck. I cut it on fire. Some Marines later went down to that pause. There's 2 bodies outside the vehicle, and there ended up 3 inside. A couple of these individuals had suicide vests on. One eventually would later blow up outside the truck. Nothing left. It blew up.
In the meantime, Captain Bethea had made his way to the last covered position across the street from the mosque and encountered snipers who were quickly eliminated through a combination of tank fire and SMAs, shoulder-launched multi-purpose assault weapons. Bethea then had the tanks create 3 breaches through the mosque courtyard walls.
It's just my headquarters element, meaning myself, my first sergeant, some radio operators, and then my second platoon is what we led to get the last covered and concealed position across the street from the mosque. I led that element with a small security detachment for navigation purposes to get it right on the money, and we crossed several linear danger areas en route through the built-up area and took sporadic machine gun fire down all the alleyways. We seized the last covered and concealed position by getting the engineers forward and breaching into this compound, and once we breached the main entry into this walled compound, the Iraqi forces were right in trace of us and consolidated in that position. Once we had the last covered and concealed position, we were immediately pinned down by very, very intense sniper fire. So the immediate concern was to eliminate the sniper fire, or else we couldn't get the Iraqis out of the compound to attack the mosque. So the way we did that is we employed our tanks, giving them a cardinal direction of where the sniper fire was coming from, and once the tanks employed their main gun against the buildings where the snipers were from, that enabled us to get up and get eyes on where the snipers were coming from so we could destroy them with our small rockets. And once we got the sniper fire threat neutralized, then we used the tanks to create breaches in the mosque for the Iraqis. The Iraqi handlers did not want to go into the door of the mosque thinking it may be booby-trapped. So what we did is we used tank main gun rounds to blow 3 breaches into the mosque. And the tanks did exactly as we directed and required as a result of the geometry of fire issues with our adjacent unit, which was Bravo Company, to our western flank. So they breached the northern wall of the mosque, shooting from the north to the south, as well as they breached the western side of the mosque, firing from west to east. I directed their fires to ensure that at no time they fired at Bravo Company. Once the tank rounds had conducted the breaches into the mosque, the Iraqi handlers and I determined that the breaches were adequate. We then collected all of the smoke we had within 2nd Platoon and on order at my command deployed as many smoke grenades as we could to create a couple of seconds of smoke wall so the remaining sniper threat that had only been neutralized and not destroyed would be ineffective against the Iraqis. Once the smoke screen was set, then the Iraqis breached the mosque and seized the objective. They were successful. They went into the breach and had 4 enemy KIA when they seized the mosque.
Several other insurgents were killed by the force recon snipers as they fled the building.
The tanks notified me of the enemy fleeing from the mosque through the alleyways after the Iraqis secured it. So I sent my tanks on a patrol due south where they killed 2 enemy in an alleyway that were fleeing from the mosque. And so once the mosque was secured, we still continued to kill the enemy as he was departing the area.
A sweep of the mosque uncovered a cache.
We found Dragunov sniper rifles, AK-47s, rocket-propelled grenades, hand grenades, as well as explosives and IED-making material. Also in the mosque, we found a clinic where we could see that insurgents had used to treat themselves.
After the mosque had been secured, the reconnaissance unit, now reinforced by Team 2, decided to move in order to provide better support to Charlie Company. They had to cross an open field to get to another building. Team 1 went across. Staff Sergeant Dietrich.
So my team was the first team to cross the field. As we were crossing, we noticed there was already a group of grunts, a squad of 1-8 in a building, kind of in the direction we're going. As we were crossing the field, as soon as we got pretty much halfway through, down the alley, enemy machine gun fire opened up and just instantly took out my ATL, Dave Caruso. So we were between a building and a garbage dumpster taking a heavy enemy machine gun fire. I had some guys trapped outside the dumpster. They made it inside the safe zone. From there, my saw gunner automatically was crawling over to my ATL that was down. He was outside the dumpster. He was trying to pull him into the safe area, and my point man and my RTO, they went ahead and punched across and found us a building to get into. Then my assistant radio operator, he went ahead and punched across. Me and my saw gunner, we tried to go ahead and confirm if my ATL was actually a KIA or if he was alive. As I was crawling up to help my saw gunner out, some kind of armor piercing anti-tank round punched through the garbage dumpster, hit the ground in front of me, bounced off my left forearm, hit the wall behind me, and bounced back at me. It was basically a cylinder piece of steel about a foot and a half by an inch in diameter. I got up to my saw gunner. He's like, I got to cut my ATL's ruck because he was down. We cut his ruck, and as soon as we cut his ruck, we could see that he was gone. So we got up. My saw gunner ran across to get the rest of my team. Then I got up, ran across. As I was running across, I was carrying the Sasser, the 50 cal. That was pretty big and heavy. Tripped and fell right in the enemy fire. I got up and luckily made it through there and continued, got to the building, called the other team, my platoon commander, let him know what happened. Now my platoon was separated from Team 2, my headquarters element.
Staff Sergeant Christopher Jewell, Team Leader, Team 2.
Team 1 ended up getting stranded. They made it across the road minus one of their guys, but they were minus 2 at that time because they already medevac 1. They got across the road and they were stuck there basically. They had an interlocking machine gun fire from both directions. That building was getting hit from the east, the southeast, and the direct south continuously that day. We had shooting positions all around that building, sniper positions. I know that my ATL, he took out 2 guys across that road to the southeast with sniper rifle. I had taken out 1 to the south about 200 yards away with a sniper rifle. My saw gunner and a couple guys from headquarters had taken out 2 guys that was running southeast. They were heading southwest, cut them behind a building, and then we had some guys from Team 1 that was located in the northern part of the building to the northeast take out about 4 or 5 guys that we know for sure. There's no doubt in my mind that we definitely disposed of a lot of fucking moose that day. I believe that we ended up getting the upper hand in that area, and all those guys started fleeing, and as they fled, we killed them.
Another squad was able to retrieve Caruso's body. Staff Sergeant Jewell.
12 or 1,300, a squad popped out of nowhere to the southeast and ended up grabbing one of our fallen comrades on the road and dragging him over to us. At that time, Team 1 was able to go ahead and push back to us across the road that they had desperately tried to get across.
First Lieutenant Christopher Connor.
We tried to support them. At this time, we were encountering a lot of sniper fire. So we fortified our position, called for a medevac to help our force reconnaissance Marines out. When the medevac came up to get those guys, they encountered that same sniper. Unfortunately, they took 2 casualties as well in retrieving their casualty and then got out of there.
Staff Sergeant Christopher Jewell.
2 more wounded in action, which was from my team. I had a Lance Corporal Bell, got trapped in the face, put a hole in his right cheek, and chipped some of his back teeth. We medevaced him. Another guy in my team, Sergeant Charleston, he just got a bunch of small cuts all over his face, but he stayed and kept fighting.
Major Morris spotted one of the insurgent positions.
We managed to find an OP. It was an observation post that was very well hidden. It also had a mortar tube in it, and it also had a rocket launcher in it, and it was covered with almost, it looked like our cami netting, so they could never see it from the air. We found that OP. We put about 6 sniper shots into it because we saw some movement in there. We didn't see any more movement from that OP.
Later, one of Major Morris's sergeants spotted 2 men carrying weapons.
I have Sergeant Davis look over at me, and I'm on the top of the building, and he's like, "Sir, who are those people right there?" I look out, and 100 meters to our east, just below the building with Marines, slinking along their wall so that the Marines up there can't see him, is a guy with an RPK and a guy with an AK-47. They also have 2 more guys coming out that are carrying a carpet that are trying to slink down the wall closest to our building. It was obvious that they were working together. It was obvious that there was probably something in that carpet. It was obvious that those guys, most likely, they had come out of the alleyway where the shots came that had killed Sergeant Caruso. So we basically took all those guys out. We took those 4 guys out, and almost simultaneously, the guys in the southern portion of the building came in contact with 3 to 4 more enemy moves down on that side, and we took those guys out. And we believe they were all part of the same group that had killed Sergeant Caruso that were in that alley. So it felt pretty good to take those guys out. We took them out with our M4s. Myself and Sergeant Davis, we shot 3 of them. My gun jammed. My M4 jammed. I jumped down. I cleared the jam, got back up. By that time, the guy with the RPK had hidden behind bushes, and it was the only place he could have gone. And the problem was the Marines over there in that building couldn't see him, and they had no idea where he was. So I knew the guy was in the bushes. I put about 20 to 25 rounds of M4 ammo into the bushes to try to get him out. Just made dedicated shots all along the angle, see if we could get him. He didn't move, so I don't know if I killed him then or what. But what we did was to ensure that we got him. We brought the saw up, and we put about 200 rounds into that bush, and he never moved. And then after the fact, later that night, somebody went up there and checked out the area, and they found his body back there. So we got all 4 of those guys, and that was a very, very good thing. And for me, it was very unique being a fact. Never thought I'd ever have to kill somebody with my M4 or, my own personal weapon. Usually we're a standoff asset, but I tell you, for me, that was probably the best thing that I did out there the entire 10 days, because we knew that those people had killed Sergeant Crusoe. So it felt pretty good.
Staff Sergeant Christopher Jewell.
Then about 1800, right when it got dark, we went ahead and pulled out of that building. We moved west on Beth, and then we went south on Ethan down to the mosque, where we linked up and everything kind of calmed down there for the night.
The battalion's disposition at the end of the day found Charlie Company at the mosque and Bravo Company across the street in the Cultural Center. Alpha Company remained north of the breach, preparing to advance south to take the mayor's complex. 2nd Battalion, 2nd Infantry. Captain Jeffrey Beauchamp, RCT-7 Army Liaison.
We had Alpha Company Team 2, which we called Team Mech, because they were a mech infantry team, because they had a tank platoon with them as well. And Alpha 263 we called Team Tank, which had a Bradley platoon as well. Well, our mission was to destroy the enemy zone. The purpose was to protect the flank of the main effort. So our sector was along the northeastern portion of Fallujah first for Phase 3 Alpha. We brought our own 2 paladins with us. So they were direct support of Task Force 2-2 and general support to RCT-7. So they would fire for anybody who needed it unless 2-2 had a mission, in which case they fired our mission first. And then we had our 120mm mortar platoon. It was very responsive having 2 paladins that were direct support. They were always ready to fire for us.
The Abrams and Bradleys of Captain Paul Fowler's Alpha Company's 2nd Battalion 63rd Armor Regiment rolled out of their attack position right on schedule at 17:14, fully an hour and 45 minutes before they were scheduled to cross the line of departure. Alpha Company took their attack by fire positions without incident and prepared to provide covering fire for the breaching operation. At 1900, Fowler ordered his vehicles to fire 3 volleys into the buildings that fronted the breach site. The results were exactly as we had hoped, Fowler said, creating massive casualties and chaos within the enemy ranks, disrupting their ability to defend against the breach. 15 minutes later, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Newell, commanding officer of 2-2 Infantry, sent Alpha Company, known as Team Mech, across the line of departure. Captain Sean Sims' company went through the breach in about 10 minutes, but not without incident. The minute the first Bradley went through, Staff Sergeant James Amyad exclaimed, "It was like the 4th of July down there, with small arms fire coming from every direction." Staff Sergeant David Bellavia's vehicle passed through when, boom, it felt like the vehicle lifted off the ground. Sergeant First Class Cantrell's Bradley had a small fire under its track leading up to the initial dismount. Bellavia kept moving. While Team Mech was going through the breach, Lieutenant Boggiano's platoon moved to the high ground overlooking the city, shooting anything that moved in the area. Captain Beauchamp.
We started making contact when we moved into the assault positions, the attack positions, started receiving indirect fires. We were able to move a couple M1 tanks up to observe into the city where they were firing from. Hours before the LD, we'd already fired and destroyed probably 20 enemy positions just with our M1 tanks returning fire.
Captain Neil Prakesh, platoon leader with Alpha Company 263 Armor, comprising 2 tanks, 2 Bradleys, and 2 infantry squads and attached to the BRT, was west of the Cloverleaf when my gunner sees 3 to 5 guys running south to north across phase line Fran and go into a building in front of a mosque about 2.5 clicks away. Prakesh lazed it and came up with a 10-digit grid coordinate, which was needed for an artillery mission. At the moment, there were guys running out of this building pouring diesel fuel into the streets and setting it on fire, he recalled. I called Ramrod 18, the fire guy, that's an artillery fire direction control, and told him what I saw. After providing the direction, the grid, and distance, he requested 1 round for observation. So the round comes in and landed right on top of this guy pouring diesel on the flames. Prakish screamed, "Fire for effect! Fire for effect!" The 2 paladins at Camp Fallujah fired 20 155mm rounds, something like 1 round every 30 seconds. Some hit the building and some hit just south of it, but every explosion was like a volcano. 3 to 5 guys shot up like they'd come out of a geyser, and they were perfectly still, not waving or fanning their arms. They were already dead as they were airborne and blossoming out. Prakish estimated that the first salvo killed 30 to 50 insurgents. He called for an additional 10 rounds. Right before this, a guy came out of the building, dragging his AK by the sling, and just then these 10 rounds land right on his head. At the same time, the BRT tanks were firing their main guns into the building. My gunner sees a guy get blown off the 7th story, hit the ground so hard that he bounced up about 2 stories off the asphalt. It was the most insane, surreal thing I've ever seen. Sometime later, Prakish was told that the fire mission he called took out Omar Hadid, the second in command of Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. A battle damage assessment estimated that over 70 insurgents were killed. Captain Beauchamp.
Team MEC secured the breach. At that point, BRT, the reconnaissance troop, moved south on the eastern boundary of the city to observe the targets. Then Team Tank moved through the breach, and they got secured what we call Objective Coyote, which was a schoolyard.
They took the objective at 23:28, a little over 4 hours after commencing the attack. Newell's last unit, the attached Iraqi 6th Battalion, in large 5-ton trucks, attempted crossing the breach. They got hung up for a little while, he said. Captain James Cobb explained that the heavy tracked vehicles had eroded all the dirt that was supporting it, so when the Iraqi vehicles went over, they just bottomed out on the rails. The Command Sergeant Major, Steve Falkenberg, went back to straighten things out. Newell learned that because of the poor visibility, Falkenberg got out of his up-armored Humvee to guide it. The gunner was looking one way and the driver the other. When they looked back, they couldn't find the Sergeant Major. They got out of the vehicle and found he'd been shot over the right eye. Falkenberg was immediately evacuated and taken to the rear. Major Lisa DeWitt, 2-2 surgeon, reported Falkenberg's death was a shock to a lot of soldiers. Captain Sean Sims' Team MEC immediately established a blocking position about 1,000 meters beyond the breach to provide support for Team Tank as it came through the breach and commenced its attack into the city. 3rd Platoon rolled right through, according to Captain Jeff Emery, and started clearing houses to gain a foothold in the city. I pushed my platoon, 1st Platoon Alpha Company, through and continued going down to my first objective. Emery's platoon experienced sporadic small arms fire but used thermal sights to spot and place effective fire on the enemy. The 2 Paladin 155mm howitzers from Battery A, 1st Battalion 6th Field Artillery, supported Newell's battalion. They were positioned at Camp Fallujah along with a battery of towed M198 155mm howitzers from Mike Battery, 4th Battalion 14th Marines. Captain Beauchamp.
Having those 2 direct support Paladins, it was so much quicker just to fire the 155s at a target. That's a 155mm self-propelled howitzer. It seemed to be very effective. Nothing like 155 bringing down the enemy to suppress or destroy them.
According to Captain Beauchamp, once inside the city, Team MEC and Team Tank continued moving south on 2 axes, always moving in sections, 2 vehicles at a time, with the dismounted infantry providing security for the vehicles.
What worked best was using the 25mm cannon on the Bradley or the main gun on the tank to destroy enemy strong points, sniper positions, etc. Once Team MEC breached, Team Tank moved into a school inside the city and secured that piece of key terrain. And they essentially just started bounding forward through down south to Faisalin, which was our in advance.
1st Battalion, 3rd Marines. Trouble at the breach. Shortly after 23:30, Newell received a radio call from Lieutenant Colonel Mike Ramos, commanding officer of 1-3, requesting to send their tank platoon through 2-2 Infantry's breach. The engineers got one of their D9 bulldozers stuck in the breach. Captain Gil Juarez's Charlie Company, 1st Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion, had his 13 light armored vehicles spread out about 100 to 150 meters behind the berm, providing a screening force for the battalion's attack position. The night was pitch black, he remembered. There were support fires going out. We were putting out a smoke screen using M825 felt wedge, a 155mm white phosphorus shell designed to produce a smoke screen on the ground for a duration of 5 to 15 minutes. And we were getting occasional insurgent potshots, mortar fire, and RPGs. The word went out to bring up the engineers and the bulldozers. Juarez was assigned to provide security for the breach. The plan was to cut the tracks and have the bulldozers create a breach site, he recalled. A D9 came out of the dark and starts to veer away from the breach site. The driver did not have night vision goggles and couldn't see where to go, nor did he have a radio. So I notified my scout section to get control of the vehicle and get it over to the breach site. One of Juarez's scouts ran out and jumped on the dozer and started yelling and pointing in the right direction. The driver acknowledged and started off again. However, within a short time, the bulldozer got fouled in the tracks. It created an obstacle that effectively plugged the breach, keeping vehicles from passing through. Captain Juarez recalled, "By this time, we're way behind schedule, so the battalion brought Charlie Company forward to advance on foot." Captain Tennant recalled, "As I brought the company, one of my tracks set off an IED daisy chain, about 5 or 6 blasts. One of them hit the side of an Amtrak packed with troops. One of my men was wounded severely, a traumatic amputation of an arm and a leg. Another caught a small piece of shrapnel and suffered a concussion. A third man, one of the Amtrak crew, was struck in the face. All 3 were evacuated." Lieutenant Colonel Mike Ramos, 1-3's battalion commander, made a command decision to recover lost time. Lieutenant Colonel Vukovic.
We made an audible early on to utilize Task Force 22's breach site to his east. And rather than waiting around and trying multiple options, he immediately made a call to head out east, breach, and then come back to his zone, and it worked like a charm.
After transiting the breach site, 1-3's tanks and Amtraks cut back west to link up with Charlie Company and assist it in gaining a foothold on the northern edge of the city. To get the whole battalion into the city, it took about 8 hours, a good chunk of the first night. It was almost daylight before they got the word to move. The company pushed ahead toward its objective, a mosque in the middle of 1-3's zone. Bravo followed on their eastern flank and took a lot of gunfire from their flanks. A few Marines were injured in a blue-on-blue incident when 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines' 81mm mortar platoon was fired on by the Army Artillery Battery at Camp Fallujah. Fortunately, there were no fatalities. Captain Michael Burgoyne, Battery A Commander, 382 Field Artillery, said the teams worked together to reduce the potential for injuring friendlies.
We have their location as well as the target location, and the observers make sure, the observers make sure that they're out of range of the lethal effects of our fire, sir. It's a pretty good team we have working here together.
Captain Brian Mulvihill led his small detachment of Iraqi soldiers through the breach. It was Mulvihill, 22 Iraqi soldiers, 1 translator, and an Iraqi journalist. His assistant, Staff Sergeant Villa, led 18 more. The 2 groups made it through the breach, but with difficulty. The Iraqis were hesitant. They were being met with enemy fire, and Mulvihill was unable to get them into the city alongside Charlie Company.
The one problem we faced was as Charlie pushed in, their entire company made it in except for their attached Iraqis. So we had our lead elements right at the edge of the city and around the corner along the buildings that faced where the attack was coming from. First round hit, Staff Sergeant Villa and I sought cover by a wall, turned to our right and saw a wave of Iraqis running towards us, diving at us to avoid getting shot. I especially noted the embedded journalist lying on top of my legs as I was kneeling there quivering, and I had to kick him away from me and tell him to seek cover somewhere else.
Mulvihill grabbed the interpreter and told him to get the men lined up and to move quickly in order to catch up with Charlie Company. Mulvihill led off and the Iraqis followed.
Every time a round hit either near us or inside the city, the Iraqi soldiers scattered.
They linked up with the Marines and waited for Bravo Company to come forward.
So we waited there for quite a while. Long enough, I hate to say it, for me to actually fall asleep sitting there. We were sitting on a curb in the rain, and I should mention that my pack easily weighed 50 pounds, plus armor and other magazines and stuff. I was carrying the radio for the Iraqis.
Mulvihill's Iraqi forces followed along behind Charlie Company toward Battalion Objective B, a mosque. Once they reached it, the Marines were to provide overwatch while the Iraqis cleared the culturally sensitive building. The Iraqis were supposed to be the first ones into the mosque. Mulvihill was concerned the Iraqis were not ready.
Despite the fact that we said the battalion was not ready to do any type of night operations, especially a night attack, that was still our mission.
Upon reaching the objective, Charlie Company's attached tanks fired a couple of suppression rounds at an insurgent machine gun inside the mosque.
It was time for the Iraqis to do their thing. Turned to the Iraqi platoon commander, or actually it was a company commander, but it was a platoon size. He was a lieutenant because the captain had deserted weeks prior. And as the interpreter said, "Get your men up. We're going across this open area. We're going to take the mosque." At which point he said his men were too afraid to do it, and they were all sitting along either side of the road. And I said, "Get them up. We got to go. We got to do this. This is why they're here." At the same time, Staff Sergeant V was literally grabbing them by their gear, pulling them up, getting them in a formation to go attack the mosque. We got some of them up, then they didn't want to run across the field that had machine gun fire going across it. So out of frustration, I told Staff Sergeant V, "Let's go, grab as many as you can, we're doing this." The smarter move probably would have been to tell the American company commander, "Hey, they're not going to take the objective. We've already received fire from them, we return fire, ROE permits Americans to go in." But we still wanted the Iraqis to go in first. But in that situation, the tactically sound thing would have been to tell the American that, "Hey, you guys take it, these guys won't do it." My own personal pride wouldn't allow me to do that, so I took off in a 200-yard sprint across this open area.
Mulvihill raced past the Marine tanks.
So I made my way past the tanks, and in retrospect, the tank commander probably thought it was pretty crazy because by the time I got past him, I looked back and I was all alone. So here was one guy running past his tank to the breach in the wall of this mosque. So I turned around, I looked back, there was no one there for about 30 seconds, and then 2 Iraqis finally made their way to my position. 15 seconds later, Staff Sergeant Villa had 2 more literally pushing them and pulling them to get them up there. At which point, I told Staff Sergeant, I said, "Hey, we got to just do this." We went through the hole in the wall. I was scared like anything, but adrenaline going at that point, it wasn't going to stop me, nor Staff Sergeant Villa. And I said, "V, you got me, I got you, that's it." And we went in, and the Iraqis waited at the wall while we went in and cleared with mag lights, and I had my pistol out, and he had his rifle.
At daylight, as the company moved south, they received heavy fire from the side streets. Captain Mulvihill encountered some challenges with his Iraqi forces.
So this one particular street we were receiving heavy fire. The Marines had security, laying down suppression fire. What they taught in Vietnam was lead with the Vietnamese. We were taught lead with an Iraqi. It just wasn't happening. The Americans had to go first. So I made my way across the street and took the security on the far side and looked back, and as the Iraqis were running past the street, they had their weapons on full auto, blasting down the street and looking forward, not even looking what they were shooting at. Round easily went less than a foot by me as they ran past, and they fortunately released their trigger. I grabbed one of them, put them on security. I turned around and grabbed the platoon commander. I said, "Listen, you can't do," and again, I'll hold the profanity, "you can't just shoot at what you're not seeing, all right? You have security. Your job is to get past. When you pick up security, you can then engage the enemy."
Major General Natansky also noted the Iraqi soldiers' fire issue.
Their fire discipline left a little bit to be desired. When they pulled their trigger on their AK-47, they didn't let go until the magazine was empty.
Brigadier General Joe Dunford concurred that the Iraqi soldiers had problems.
Many of them may not know too much about geometry, which is a problem if you're going to shoot straight and you shoot to the right or the left. I mean, geometry is an issue.
Captain Mulvihill's Iraqis were following in trace of the battalion to their next objective, another mosque the Iraqis were tasked with clearing. Finally, it seemed, his Iraqis were gaining confidence in the daylight.
It was daytime now, and the Iraqis were a little more willing to fight. They had some confidence now that saw the Marines were killing people, that no Iraqis were hurt or killed yet, so they had a little more confidence. It still took me and Staff Sergeant Villa being the first ones into the compound and leading them in. We cleared it, found some small arms, but mostly anti-American propaganda in this one.
Mulvihill requested he be moved over in support of Alpha Company.
At this time, Alpha Company was going to assume the main effort, pass through Charlie Company's lines, and attack to seize BLT Objective Delta, which was a series of blocks south of what was called Phase Line Fran, and it was the automotive repair district of Fallujah. Per my request, I cross-decked over to that company and joined the advisor to that Iraqi company attached. That was Sergeant First Class Warner, Army Reservist, tanker actually. We brought those Iraqis forward and helped Alpha Company seize Objective Delta.
Mulvihill spent that night sleeping in the street.
Slept on the sidewalk. It was dark when we got there. When I woke up, I thought I wouldn't sleep on the sidewalks in my suburban neighborhood in New York, And this was like East New York and Brooklyn, the worst, dirtiest neighborhood possible. And here I was just laying on the sidewalk on the curb. Felt like a homeless person.